Hello, everybody. This is Clive Priddle, and you are looking at The Current. Today, I am joined by the authors of Impact, Christen Brandt and Tammy Tibbetts. Very happy to have you both on because you are extremely positive and forward-looking people, and you have a book that is great for all of us who feel somewhat mired in one of the more difficult years that we've been asked to endure in recent times, when perhaps our sense of purpose and how we can actually dig ourselves out of various holes that we find ourselves in seems to have been hampered by events, by circumstances, sometimes by people. And your book is all about how, as an individual, you or I can make a difference in the world, and how to find that sense of purpose, how to laser in on it, how to discover it in yourself. So I want to ask you all about that, because I think that's a fine mission for all of us going into the holiday season and the end of the year, and indeed, I hope into 2021. So tell us a little bit about how you came together to develop the book and the idea behind the book, and indeed the organization that's also part of the book's concept. So can I throw that one at you first, Christen?
Yeah, sure. So Tammy and I are the co-founders of an organization called She's the First, and we work on girls' rights and girls' education all across the globe by partnering with local organizations. And we've been at this for more than a decade now. And so you can imagine that as co-founders over the course of 11 plus years, we've really learned how to work well together. We've really kind of nailed what it means to be partners in the workspace. And we always kind of knew that we had a book in us. We were in journalism prior to starting She's the First. So we're pretty natural writers and editors, and this was always something that we joked about doing. And then 3 years ago, Tammy came into work one day and sat down and said, I think now is the time. I think we should start doing it. I think we should start working on it.
So the book came out of the organization, which is kind of really interesting. So was it that you were running your organization, and then you thought, what is it that sort of qualitatively makes a difference for us about what we do? And that was what was sort of channeled into the book. Is that sort of how it happened?
So originally, Christen and I actually set out to write a book that was focused on our mission, on girls' education and gender equality. But what many people don't know is that proposal actually got rejected across the board because it was too narrow. And when we got that rejection, we took a step back and we thought, well, there are so many people out there who want to make a difference, but they all have different issues that light them up. So how can we use our experience to give people, the hard-learned lessons that we have from a decade of leading social change, the tools, the frameworks, the skills, so that we could help them identify what it is that they're as passionate about as we are, She's the First, and take this toolkit, that this book is like a toolkit for change, to advance progress towards creating the world they want to live in. And there's so many ways that you could do that. You certainly don't need to work and run a nonprofit organization. And we're really excited that when people pick up this book, they'll be going on a really personal journey with themselves and with us.
So one of the things I love about your book is that you make it very clear to everybody that you don't have to be a billionaire before you decide to have a mission, that you can do a lot with a little, and that perhaps one of the most valuable things that any of us have to give is our time. But the time is obviously finite. We all only have 24 hours in a day, and a whole chunk of that has to be allocated to other things. So you came up with this idea of finding your North Star. Explain what the North Star idea is, and how did you guys find yours?
Yeah, so the North Star is really your vision for that world that you want to live in. So what we recommend people do as a thought exercise to start figuring out what your North Star is to think about the world 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. And what do you want that world to look like? How is that world different, your ideal world that you want to live in, from what we're living in today? And those pieces that you start to identify that you want to see changed, that is your North Star. So for us, my North Star is a world where women are safe and loved, and girls are safe and loved. And so what you'll see is that all of the impact work that I do relates back to that mission. So whether that's my work at She's the First, or even in my volunteer time, the things that I am working toward all relate to that North Star. And the movements and the kind of tangential impact areas that I work really hard to be a good ally in and to support friends in, you'll notice kind of also ladder up to that. So whether that's things like Black Lives Matter or sustainability or these issues that seemingly are not related to a North Star, like a world where all women and girls are safe, if I'm working toward this world where all women and girls are safe, that means we need to have a world to look forward to. So we need to be working on climate justice. If I want a world where all women and girls are safe, it means that is regardless of race. And so it just helps you to kind of identify what are your focal points, what are the places that you put most of your energy behind. And it also allows, I think, for you to be a more effective ally, because you immediately start to see the ways that other people's North Stars intertwine with your own to create this better world that, frankly, I think we all deserve to live in.
So that sounds, of course, a world in which girls and women are safe sounds like an obviously desirable thing. But I think for a lot of people, they would be thinking, doesn't that sort of already exist? What was it that made you think that we weren't doing enough already?
Oh, no, Clive, that does not already exist. And it's the kind of thing where in our work, for example, there are 130 million girls all around the world right now who are not in school and will likely never be in school. This pandemic means that there are 20 million more girls who were in school at the beginning of this year who are likely not going to return. We know that girls are spending 40% more of their time all around the world, including in the US, working on domestic chores, working on home responsibilities than men and boys are. We know that women are much more likely to be victims of domestic violence and abuse and assault. These are the kinds of situations that women and girls the world over are facing, and that are multiplied by their socioeconomic situation, by their race, by their local culture, or even their local community that they might be living in and the norms that they are working with there. And so, I think one of the things that will help you to define your North Star is to understand your own personal experience. Because, for you, it's going to be a lot harder for you to look at a North Star like a world where all women and girls are safe and be able to connect with that in the same way that I can, as someone who, has grown up as a girl and as a woman and who has had various experiences with emotional abuse, with discrimination, and who has watched various friends and the girls that we work with all around the world suffer through these issues as well due to this combination of gender and these various other identity factors. And so that's where everybody's North Star is going to look a little different. And that's okay, right? It's not about picking the best North Star or that there are some North Stars that are better than others. It's about picking the North Stars that light you up, the issue areas that matter the most to you, that maybe have even impacted you personally the most, because that means that you have the knowledge base and the experience to really tackle them in a holistic way. You already have kind of a foundation of knowledge for how and where to create change in that area.
So you said a whole bunch of things that are really fascinating. One of which is that clearly, you've been doing this for 10 years with She's the First. I assume that, like any organization, it hasn't been a completely smooth journey, that there have been moments where you thought, oh gosh, we're never going to make our target, whatever it is at that time. Yeah. How did you develop the sort of resilience to keep going? When the star isn't quite so bright, or when the sky is cloudy, what is it that you found that kept you going, that reassured you that you were actually on the right path? It was just going to be a little harder or a little longer than you thought.
Yeah, I mean, we're actively in that moment right now. I mean, this whole year, we celebrated our 10th anniversary last October, and it was just, we felt like we were on a rocket ship, like being ready to take off. And become a $2-3 million organization. And then this year hit, and then everything under us like kind of started to crumble. Corporate sponsorships that we had, budgets were cut, individuals lost their jobs and had to cut back on their giving. And it's been a struggle to keep our funding where it needs to be so that we can fully support our community-based partners and the girls that they serve. To date this year, we've come through and we've fulfilled those commitments. But, I'm trying to raise $300,000 before the end of the year. And it's very uncertain in the next month. And it's a constant hustle. But whenever I feel that uncertainty, I look back on the last decade and just the track record of how we've always found a way. And that's not just because, Tammy and Christen are two hardworking women. It's because we have a whole community. She's the first as a whole community that makes this happen and defies the odds every single time. But it's never a guarantee that the next time it's going to happen. So I think we're constantly on our toes, and we bring this relentless optimism to our work, not because every day when we show up, it's easy, but because every day when we show up, we are joining, the girls that we serve, the partners that we serve around the world on the front lines of school shutdowns and the repercussions of COVID. They just never give up. And when you're surrounding yourself with people who never give up in whatever space you're making a change, that's where you find the drive to keep it going. That's one of the mottos in the book, actually, keep it going. There's a story behind that from one of the women that we interview. And it's a mantra that we keep repeating to ourselves every day. So we think this comes across in the book. I would hope so, that our readers understand that, we're not sitting on this pedestal as experts in impact. We've learned a lot and we have a lot to share, but we're in the trenches too. And we're constantly reading our own advice, and these tools and these frameworks, they're for everyone who's starting out with their first service projects to the executives who've been doing it for decades. It's a constant practice, and we have to constantly remind ourselves why we do what we do and how we can keep doing better.
One piece that's really important here that we found is that rather than thinking about your impact work as what you're fighting against, think about what you're fighting for. Know what you're fighting for really deeply and really intimately, because being able to fight for something, it's a lot easier to wake up in the morning and, go to work or go to those volunteer hours or, log in online for your skills volunteer time, because you can see kind of where it's going and where it's moving to, and having that positive energy to push you through is really helpful. There are always going to be times where, as a collective, we want to push back against, whether it's legislation or events happening in the country and that kind of thing. But on a regular basis, understanding that you are not doing this work to fight against, but you are doing this work to build and to create something better, because, we know and we really fervently believe that we are capable of creating better communities, stronger communities, a better world and a stronger world. And so framing it in that way, that you are working toward that instead of pushing back against what is, I think is a really helpful mindset and tool when you think about creating impact.
Are you starting to hear of other people coming to you now and saying, okay, I think I understand this whole sort of impact concept, but, help me understand how to make it work for my priorities? Are you becoming sort of consultants in other areas of impact?
Yeah, so we refer to ourselves in the book as impact advisors. And the book, as much as it draws on our experience working with women and girls around the world, really is geared toward anyone looking to create an impact in any area. It really is a step-by-step guide to first identify the area that is most meaningful to you, the area of focus you really want to put your your time and your resources and your energy behind that North Star. And then from there, how you can think about creating an impact plan. And that impact plan is incredibly practical. The book itself is incredibly practical, but we pair that with a few chapters on impact philosophy, on sustainability, on really understanding how change happens at a systemic level and the roles that individuals have to play in that or not, right? So in order to create real change in the world, we know that we need a combination of collective action. We know that we need policy change. We know that we need these kind of bigger pieces in place. But this book is because we know that most people really want to know that they have created positive change, that they are leaving a legacy behind where the world is better off after they were here than before. And so this is really to help you think about your own individual piece in that puzzle. That puzzle is huge. We could probably write 6 more books about all of these different aspects of social change over time. But this one is really to help you focus in on the change that you want to create. And it is something that we've been doing for a long time because so many of these lessons that we've learned from working with women and girls, they are highly transferable, you know? So it is definitely a framework that's going to work for you no matter what your goals might be.
So I wanted to ask, as I say, one of the themes of the book is a certain resiliency to help people, keep going, as you say, sustainability. But tell us a couple of things a couple of instances where you got sideswiped in your mission by something that you just hadn't prepared for, and then how you bounced back from that.
I do think that COVID is, it's almost trite at this point because everyone is constantly talking about it. But the impact of a global pandemic on girls has just been devastating. And what we realized at the onset was that we had one really key tool in our toolbox, which is that we had worked with partners in Sierra Leone during the time of the Ebola crisis. And so in a way, we knew what would happen because we had that experience and our partners had that experience and the girls themselves had that experience. We could look at this global pandemic and understand the impacts that it could have on girls all around the world. And that meant, as soon as schools are closed, what we see is that rates of teenage pregnancy go up, rates of violence against girls go up, rates of child marriage go up. All of these indicators, all of these issues that we are worried about on a regular basis that impact girls, all of a sudden you start to see them skyrocketing. And so we were able to really ring the alarm on that and to work together with all of our partners to talk through strategies to make sure that girls were protected during a time when schools were closed and they were at their most vulnerable. And that's something that we're doing even now. So we've had to pivot to almost entirely online conversation and trainings. And then our partners are working either with WhatsApp, with text messages, or with kind of just phone calls and working with girls to make sure that they're staying in touch, that they understand what is happening in the girls' kind of immediate surroundings so that they can create a safety net for all of the girls within these programs. But I do think, a global pandemic in the 11 years that we've been working, that's got to be the thing that was most unsettling. That was, you talk about a rug being pulled out from under you. We've all experienced this in one way or another. And the truth is that anytime a crisis occurs, it is often women and girls who pay the biggest price.
Looking forward, do you think that one of the most serious aspects of the pandemic is the way that it isolates people, and that perhaps that's particularly dangerous for girls because they don't have a community of other girls to support them. Suddenly, they're perhaps back in the home, or as you say, no longer reachable in the same way that they were before. Is there any way that this pandemic is going to help us solve that problem, or is it actually just going to make it harder for a little while?
Well, there's a couple sides to that. On a positive note, in areas where girls didn't have technology access, tablets or laptops, there have been fundraising efforts to get that in their hands so that they can continue their education as schools have been shut down. So that's an absolute game changer. I mean, that's the kind of investment that allows a girl to leapfrog. And just like we see with youth in the US who take their devices for granted, for these girls to have computers for the first time for online education is a game changer. So that's a positive. One of the scarier aspects is that as schools have shut down and girls groups can't meet up anymore because of social distancing concerns, those were the spaces that if a girl was being abused at home or in danger, that's where she could confide in someone. And even in the US in these circumstances, it is oftentimes teachers who notice that something is up with a student who is at risk at home. And when those girls are behind closed doors with no one to check in on them, that's where the rates of violence go up. And I think that is really what makes this whole situation a matter of life and death. And it's going to create an incredible amount of trauma, which is why there's a phase of this that is just dealing with the crisis at hand right now. But this is going to take years of rehabilitating girls, catching them up on education that was lost, and just looking after their mental health so that they can continue to go into their adulthood and have that freedom to choose their path in life. Because that's why we do what we do. We fight for a world where girls can choose their own future. And we can't give up on that and let this very trying year throw that all away. And the window of opportunity for us to intervene and do so effectively by doubling down on that support for community-based organizations, that window is closing. And I think the end of 2020 is the time to step up and contribute to that change. And even if it's in the smallest way, if thousands and millions of people did that, it would make a really big difference.
It's really been highlighting all across the globe the stratification that students are dealing with. And what's been happening is that students in the US and abroad who have access to technology, who are able to do online classes and online education, and are able to do that in a quiet environment where they're able to focus, maybe they have a caregiver who can sit with them, those are the students who are going to come out of the other side of this pandemic and, have a story to tell to their kids one day. But there are a lot of students all around the world who don't fall into that category, who don't, Tammy mentioned access to technology specifically. In the US, there's been a lot of conversation about whether or not Wi-Fi is a right. If the only way that you can access your education, and education is a right, is via Wi-Fi, is via internet, then shouldn't that also be something that you can access for free? Shouldn't that be something that everyone has access to if it makes such a fundamental difference in your trajectory as a student, as a citizen, as a person? And we're seeing that play out in the global stage as well, which is that the baseline that we considered acceptable for girls and for students for so long is no longer acceptable. We're realizing that allowing students to scrape by on here's a pencil, here's one notebook for the year, here's a backpack, here's a broken, blackboard slate that you can use in class, it's better than nothing. Better than nothing is no longer enough. We've seen that the disparity is too great, and the outcomes for students who have the access are so much better than outcomes for students who don't have that access. And so my hope is that as we come out the other side of this pandemic, we can collectively realize and work toward a baseline that is much more equitable for all students.
I think that would be a really excellent note to pause on. That sounds like a big impact ambition, and that's exactly what the book is all about. and I can't think of anybody who wouldn't want to support it. And I hope that you are going to be supportive when this video goes into the world, and that your fundraising targets are met by the end of the year. And I really want to thank you both, Tammy and Christen, for joining us today on The Current, and wish you every success.
Thank you so much, Clive.
Hachette,